So we were talking about VR the other day, and people were asking kind of about my history with it on kind of the growth of it. So VR is this weird thing that let me see how fast technology leaps and then it crawls, right? I mean, look at your phone. Your phone hasn't changed much since the iPhone, but man, the iPhone was crazy, right? And so I was working at Valve, and I was kind of unhappy working on some Source 2 thing, writing some Squirrel code, right? They pulled Squirrel out of it. That's how early it was. And just it really wasn't going anywhere. That's a whole other conversation. And I had seen the VR early. I'd seen like the DK2 level of VR, and I'd seen Left 4 Dead that way, and it just made me sick as a dog, and I wasn't really interested in it. It was like cool, it made you visceral, but whatever. And then Michael Abrash and Doug Church invited me down to come see the VR that they had, the room, the tag room. Maybe I'll put some pictures in here. Maybe I won't. So we'll see. But all right. But the tag room is the idea that there's these tags in the room. And instead of like, you have like the Quest Now just kind of scans your room and then like, oh, I know where your head is because I can do the math. If this is in the image and this is in the image, what's going on? The tag room short circuited that and made these specific tags that you would then scan ahead of time. And then you would build up kind of the version of the room that then the computer would process and then generate the images back. Right. And it sounds really hokey and really clunky, but this was the leap. This was the leap that nobody saw, because at this point, we still had people thinking 360 VR was the thing, right? The Oculus was going to ship as a sit down thing where you didn't moving your head didn't make a difference because it was just going to be 360 around you, right? And that was horrible VR. In fact, we'll get to a funny little bit on that. So we have a version of this and we have another version of this, and we're kind of plotting around with it, trying to figure out what it is. And this is why they asked me to come down to see it. And I come down and I see the second demo and I'm amazed by it. It just blows me away. It's this giant field and it's so great. So I'm like, okay, I'm stupid though. I don't know anything about this. I don't know. I'm not like, oh my God, VR all my life kind of person, right? And so I just go into the demo room and I watch them give demos to other people, smarter people than me, giving demos to smarter people than me, getting demos, and just picking up how they talked about it. And then I would come back often because I gave Doug Church a ride home at that time. And I'd be like, hey, is this the right way to talk about it? And he's still a very engineering person, though, very personable engineering person, where sometimes he'd be like, oh, you're breaking it down too much or whatever. And I'd be like, no, humans. We got to translate this to human talk. Because it's very, very technical, right? Proprioception is an idea of like your body existing in a virtual space, right? So like all this trying to break down. So I'm kind of figuring this out. And then I'm also going out and visiting devs and kind of talking with them about what they're doing. Seeing some people do some crazy stuff with the DK2. I remember Denny Unger from the team that would go on to make Pistol Whip, showing me some early work that they were doing, and they were using a different kind of controller where you moved it, and that moved you. And I just remember there was too many buttons on it, and I couldn't see them. But how Denny talked about it, he was super smart. And I'm like, oh man, all right, now I'm excited. This makes a lot of sense. But we hadn't really had a plan yet. We're just talking to all these people. And then Facebook buys Oculus, and they just inject so much money into the ecosystem. Gabe's like, we're out. This is not going to make any sense, because I've talked about this before, right? If somebody's paying if someone's funding a game for $10 million, but they're only going to make $1 million on that game, that's not a sustainable ecosystem. And that's what Facebook was showing that they were willing to do. So that kind of just blew this all out of the water. And so we kind of had this miserable day of, we actually were going to set up another tag room. So we had set up a tag room at Oculus, actually. And that's what Zuckerberg saw. Depending who wants to debate that one. That's what he saw. And so we were about to set up another one in LA to show it to some artists, because I was of the mind of like, guns are going to come, violence is going to come, all those things that I do use in games as well is going to come. We don't need to do that. What we need to reach out is art. This is a new platform. This is a new kind of identity, new chance to do something that's more than just another first-person shooter. And so we were going down to LA and we were scouting locations to set up another room. And it's kind of funny because we'd go into these places and be like, give us your worst room. No windows, like in the middle, quiet. It was bad. And actually, we were in the middle of shipping stuff down when we pulled the rug on the entire VR thing. And there was a shipment somewhere of a place that got a bunch of weird stuff to build a tag room that we just left go. So I was pretty bummed out. But then pretty quickly afterwards, somebody knew somebody at HTC. We started a conversation with them and they're like, hey, we'll do this with you. We'll build it. And people were kind of like angry enough and kind of like fire lit underneath them, like, yeah, hell yeah, we're going to do this. So we're still trying to figure this out of what that means. And we're going out and we're talking to people. And I remember going to Boston for a game jam, and the people from MIT came by to see the VR stuff we had. So we had like what everyone was using publicly, and then we had something privately that was the special thing that you can move your head and move around the world. And this one guy's like, oh, you got nothing ahead of us, man. We're funded by the military. The military is like 100 years ahead of you. And then he sees it and he just shuts up, literally doesn't say a word and walks out. Like, because he realizes that he has just seen like the future and he's not it. The other people that were this way, and it was a good learning lesson, was I'll just say a 360 movie company that was going to take over the world because all of a sudden people were going to care not about the content of the movies, but that it was in 360. We show them the tag room. The CEO gets mad at me and starts yelling at me. The CTO instantly starts spinning his head and going, you can see him doing the math of like, this isn't out yet. This is gonna be out in 6 months. We need to have a solution. Like, and he's just instantly, because he's like, if I can get this down in my head, what just happened, I can then now Monday morning when I get to the office, we can start like the plan and working. And of course, he lost out and the CEO lost out, and you've never heard of that company since. Yeah, they're gone. But hey, I think they raised like $35 million because VCs always know the right answer. All right, but so like, all of this is happening. I'm talking with people. We're making people then sign NDAs to sign an NDA to meet with HTC. We have this meeting at Valve. We're like, hey, do you want to be part of this or not? And at that point, I'd already been working with Google because we had been wanting to build a room down for Google because I was really interested in Google Earth. I was a giant proponent of that, as were other people. But like let's give them the tools to do this. They're really smart. They can throw money at this. It's weird. Almost everybody who I talked to back then is gone. Maybe a couple people are. Do you ever wonder what I did at Valve? Like occasionally there'd be these meetings like, hey, Google's coming by. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'll show up. I'll hang out. And then I look around and I'm like, oh, wait, I'm running this meeting. No one else is here. And then later one of the guys from Google, some older VP comes up to me outside the meeting room. It's like, hey, are you Trent from Old Man Murray? I'm like, yes, I am. Worlds collide. All right. But so like, we're just flying at this, right? We're just like, Google's like, yeah, we're in on this. And actually they were really supportive of like, yeah, let's just share all our knowledge. And everybody just shared. So from tiny little devs that were coming in, like Tilt Brush of 2 people coming in, coming and hack into our offices for a little bit, to Google, to everybody just was sharing. Everyone was great and supportive of each other. And I love that. Unity was a part of that. Unreal was a part of that. We got them all demos as well. And it was just like flying forward and nobody talked. So we were going to unveil the headset at GDC, but come December, we had yet to have a working headset. Go look at pictures. Like, this is giant, like, looks like torture device out of the medieval times that we had at that point. And so that's what we're going to go out to, and we're going to go out to Europe, and we're going to go work with the devs there to set it up, because it takes a lot of setup. Oh my God, and Doug Church is the one who's the king of the setup. Man, he is really good at it. But so we're getting in the plane, me and Doug, and we're like, we're going to go on vacation around Europe because it's not working yet, and then this is just be a bunch of junk. Or they're going to get it working. And literally they got the lighthouses working as we were in flight. And we ended up setting up like Vertigo and Bossa and some others, right? Like, again, you learn who you can work with. You ask them questions and how they respond to you. That's how we chose. Like, you had to have enough people that we thought you could do it because you're going to have very little time. And also you were doing something that could be interesting in a 3D space, or some people who are doing really cool 2D things, but that wasn't going to do what we needed for the demo. And so the demo came up with this idea that there'd be one track, and it just was like, we're going to start with the blue because it's this cool, peaceful thing. Nobody ever gets bothered by that. Then Tilt Brush. And then like, we'll have all these slots that fill in. And if people don't successfully do it, it's okay. Like, we'll just not have that slot. But if they fill it in, we'll have multiple demos. And so you can get, these multiple demos. And so that's all going really well. We tell them all that, hey, you've got to solve the problem of people are going to have a headset on. They're going to have, they're not going to hear us. They're going to have the headset visually and they can't hear the words. So sonically. And so you got to make sure that the whole event works without us having interference or interrupting them. And then we said at the last, I think, final 2 weeks, we're like, hey, by the way, we're actually going to have a headset. We can talk to them. Where are the pain points that people get stuck? We'll help them get over it, right? Augusta Butlin is the other one who worked a lot with me on this. Her and I did kind of the software side of it, while Ken Birdwell kind of ran the hardware side, and a whole bunch of people, like on both sides. Like, there were a bunch of really smart people. But one of the things we did was making sure is the controllers at the time, were really simple, because I remember that thing with Denny where I couldn't figure out what buttons I was pressing. So we kept it really simple, because you have a headset. No one, you think everyone knows and pick up an Xbox controller, but most of the world doesn't, right? And so we kept that really simple, but we wanted to make sure that if they broke, we instantly set them new versions of it. Because we wanted to make sure that they didn't start getting used to not using all of the controls available to them because it was broken. And if you remember those early systems, you actually had to have a USB port on your side because they weren't wireless yet. Man, that's crazy. All right. But so like we're just running hard. Me and Doug go off to Mobile World Congress right before GDC, and Doug sets up Mobile World Congress. I do the PR press side of it and get into a lot of arguments with HTC of how we're going to talk about this. You learn to work with people. And then, we just go a lot of back and forth on it. We get that out. We do where nobody's a lot of talk about it, an press embargo, and GDC hits. We have it and actually don't have Google Earth because the internet kept clipping out. So I made the decision to pull it off. And that announcement though, man, people just like losing their minds, right? So one of the things we did differently was when you came and got the demo at Valve, like I talked about, you got like, talk to and like people, the stats and what's in all this technical stuff. We didn't do that at the GDC demo or the Mobile World Congress. We threw you out and you had to come up with the words, because then you had to be like hyperbolic because you didn't know the language to speak about this, right? And this was just great, right? It caught everybody's by surprise. It caught Facebook by surprise. It caught people I knew at Facebook. I was like, everyone kind of knew now that this existed. Like they were aware this would, but they didn't realize how fast we were going. And like, we're going so fast of like, if you were at the Unity Vision thing in LA and you got a headset, it's because we had to make a test run of 5,000 units just to see if we could do the run of them. And we just took half of them and just gave them away at that event. So like half of them the Unity, half of them Unreal. That kind of, right? But so like it was just moving so fast and so crazy. And then it just like it kind of just, this is the standing controllers world moving around you, some around space, right? Even the Quest is just, they've gotten it where it's all in the headset and it's computing the visual without needing lighthouses or pre-scanning the room in the same way. But it's like a version of what existed, right? And so to me, that's always so kind of interesting of like getting to be the person who showed that VR the first time to somebody blew their minds. I know people who got funded for tens of millions of dollars because they were the first people to show some big VC this VR, and they weren't blown away by the experiences, they were the VR itself, right? And it was just mind-boggling different, right? And then we just threw ourselves into it. We supported it, and unlike, so Facebook was very guarded about how they gave it. And I remember the week after GDC was VRLA, and the developers of the Blue wanted to go down, WeVR, and share it publicly, and people were freaked out about it. And I'm like, nope, little boys grew up, they're in college now. We got to let them go get drunk and cause trouble. We're going to just have to deal with it. And we did that so much that the next CES, which is after GDC, right? The one before GDC, we weren't on the show floor at all. HTC wasn't on the show floor. We walked around. It was all hidden and it was all like Facebook controlled and very proper. The next CES, I remember at one point we were supporting like 50 booths and getting asked like, how are we going to do that in a reasonable way? And I'm like, well, it's going to just have to happen. Let's not sleep and get that all set up and support it. And that's what we did. And you go from one CES to the next, and you go from a CES that is Oculus private and quiet to a CES, which is just like the vibe everywhere. And that's what we had to do to gather like enough mind share, because Oculus had done so much mind grabbing ahead of time. And so, yeah, that was pretty exciting as well. Again, HTC's a crazy place, man. I'm complaining that they're setting me up for an 8 a.m. Interview the one day, and then their PR person's calling me at 3 a.m. to go out drinking. I didn't go. They're fun though. But like, that was just the pace and the wildness of it all. Like, it was just nonstop. I mean, there was a point where a hotel chain thanked me for my 75th day at their hotel chain, and it was like October. was like, oh, geez. But I got a bunch of other cool stuff out of it. Like the Cleveland Indians, I would try anything, right? And so there's a batting, you can get pitched professionally from baseball players, and they hooked up a controller onto a bat and you'd swing and hit the ball. And I got to go show that to the Cleveland Indians because they were going to use it for people coming back off of injury to get them back up to speed. And I think they used it to some extent. But man, the greatest VR moment of my life was we are showing this to the Cleveland Indians at the time, now the Cleveland Guardians, and they're talking and they're serious, but the batting coach is in there. I think Brantley was in there, somebody else, and I had the headset on, and I knew I could set it just to pitch down the middle, and it would just pitch fastballs down the middle. I'm a pretty good baseball player. If you can time a fastball sitting down the middle, you can hit it out. And I hit one out. And like the thing's like, woo, you hit a home run. And it's not like a toy, right? This is like a serious sim. So I hit a home run. I lift the head up. The batting coach gives me a big high five. I had to put it down. My head set back over my eyes because I was smiling too much. That was a pretty good moment. So like, but that was like VR. It's like, it was just meeting everywhere and trying everything. And now it hit the wall of reality, right? Of like, oh, it's not going to be this. Like, it's going to move way more slower now, way more incremental. We're going to see, less giant leaps of changes and way more refinement of things. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to stop working in that field, was like being at that cusp, being at that jump of it. I remember going to talk with my wife and saying like, hey, I'm going to have to travel a lot for this. There's going to be a lot of support. It's going to be a lot of running around. And I'm going to be away from the family. But I think this is something like this opportunity is never going to exist again. And I am eternally grateful to being asked to play a role in that and getting a chance to do that. Getting a chance to travel the world, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Once going to China, while I had shingles and staying awake for 8 hours during a talk that was all in Chinese. My greatest achievement. I think I talked about that before, where Cher Wang, the CEO of HTC, is kind of like a superstar in China. So when she sits down, like there's 10 minutes of photo taking, and then I sit down next to her and there's like 5 minutes. What do you do with your hands when they're just taking photos of you nonstop? I do not know how people handle paparazzi for real, because you're like, yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. But it did keep me awake. Partially because it kept me awake because I was the only Westerner in the entire room, and I didn't want to be the Westerner falling asleep during the talks, even though they all talked in Chinese the entire time. Talk some crazy stuff though, because I could see the charts. No, it's not going to be bigger than cell phones. Yeah, but whatever. But like it was just a good crazy kind of seeing a lot of people just trying stuff, and people seeing that where people are just like, we don't quite understand this, but we know if we go hard and fast at it, we can be part of it. And so many people not understanding really the limitations, or willing to accept that the limitations were coming. Being in an investor meeting where they asked, well, how do we bring women into VR? And it's literally a room full of 50 dudes. And their idea was pink headsets. I nicely pulled those VCs aside and gave them a list of women they can invite next time to the event. It's also where I came up with the rule that Ed Stern actually came up with first, and I followed it as, white dudes, if you're going to give a panel talk, make sure there's diversity on the panel, because there's a bunch of diversity in the industry. We just hide it because people take the Rolodex that they know me, so they put me in the thing. So I would not give talks unless there was diversity on the talk with me, and everybody respected that and brought people on, because there's a ton of people out there that are doing really cool stuff. And we just do this big lazy thing where the middle-aged white guy is kind of the voice of authority. But so yeah, got to do that as well. So I mean, like, there's a whole bunch of ways that it was an interesting, weird, strange time, and super fun, and super glad to be a part of it. But then I just want to go back to making games. I'm not a technologist. I'm not, a diehard VR only person. And I just want to go back to making games. And so that's what I did. But I mean, some of that was fun. Some of that was exciting. Some of that was strange and weird, and learned a lot. Learned a lot. There's a lot of smart people out there. So hopefully they're doing smart things in other ways now. Not Web3. But yeah, I take AI with the same grain of salt of like, we've seen these big jumps. I don't think the next big jumps are going to be just as big. That's just not how technology works. I don't know. There you go. That was a long one. 20 minutes of ranting. I need to go take a nap.